My mom didn't call. She didn't even hesitate. She just texted me saying, please don't come. The family wants a drama-free wedding. And a second later, my sister Serena liked the message like my absence was some kind of gift to everyone. I stared at the screen, feeling the quiet snap inside me. The kind you don't hear but you never forget. So I typed back, great choice. And with that, I stopped being their safety net. They had no idea what was coming next, but before I tell you everything, tell me where you're listening from in the comments so I know I'm not alone. Let me back up so you understand why I did this. And why I decided to meet them at the airport with a lawyer instead of a hug. My name is Valentina, and in my family I was never the favorite. Not even close. I was the reliable one, the organized one, the one who always showed up with a plan and a payment method. That was my assigned role long before I was old enough to understand I could choose a different one. From the outside we looked polished, almost enviable. My mother Marissa carried herself like she was born to host perfect gatherings, her smile sharp enough to cut through a room, while my father Edward drifted through life, quietly stepping aside whenever conflict approached. And then there was my sister Serena, beautiful, adored, and endlessly excused. When she walked into a room, people made space. But when I walked in, people handed me responsibilities. The strange thing is, I didn't mind for a long time. I'm a project manager by trade, so I like spreadsheets and timelines. Structure makes sense to me even when people don't. So when the family asked for help planning Serena's wedding, I said yes the way I always did. It wasn't even a question. I handled the deposits, the venue coordination, the lighting team, and the catering schedules. Every bill landed on my desk and I paid them without hesitation. Not because Serena deserved it, but because my mother expected it. There was only one person who ever truly saw me, my grandmother. In her small garden behind the house, she'd trim roses while telling me that strength isn't only in what you carry, but also in what you refuse to pick up. I didn't understand it then. I thought being strong meant saying yes to everything. But leading up to the wedding, little things kept tightening around me like strings someone else was pulling. Marissa would compliment Serena's choices, then look at mine like they were inconveniences. Edward kept repeating how grateful Serena was, even though Serena hadn't thanked me once. During one planning meeting, when I suggested adjusting the guest count to match the budget, Serena didn't even look up from her phone. She just sighed and said, Val, can't you just make it work? You always do. That sentence sat in my chest for days. Still, I pushed through, visiting my grandmother before every major decision, letting the quiet of her home reset me. She sensed that something was wrong, but I didn't want to burden her. She'd already seen too much disappointment in this family, so I kept the peace. On the morning the text came, the one uninviting me, I was sitting in my apartment reviewing the final payment schedule. The light from the window hit the necklace my grandmother had given me. A small silver pendant, she said, represented clarity. Funny how clarity always comes right before something breaks. That was the day I realized I wasn't part of their celebration. I was just funding it, and for the first time that truth didn't hurt, it steadied me. In the days after that message, everything in my family's group chat took on a strange shine. It was too cheerful and too curated, like they were all performing a version of unity that didn't include me. That was the first sign, but the second came quietly, almost disguised as excitement. Seeing as Marissa announced she wanted a wedding week, a series of pre-events to impress Serena's future in-laws. She said it lightly, as if she were discussing brunch options, but her eyes flicked toward my grandmother's savings envelope sitting on the counter, and I froze. She tried to mask it, but the intention was there. They wanted to use my grandmother's money, the little she kept tucked away for emergencies, the fund she protected like sacred ground. I looked at her and said, Mom, that's not what that money is for. She blinked as if confused by my tone and said, Valentina, don't be dramatic. Serena is only getting married once. I looked to Serena, hoping for some sign she understood the weight of what our mother was suggesting, but she just shrugged, adjusting the sleeve of her new dress, the one I had quietly paid for, and said, it's not a big deal, Val. Grandma doesn't even use that money. My stomach tightened because I knew they had planned this, or at least talked about it when I wasn't around. Later that week, I took my grandmother to a dress fitting. She moved slowly but proudly, her hand warm in mine. While she stood in front of the mirror, smoothing fabric over her hips, she whispered, I heard your mother talking. They're preparing things without you. Her voice had that trembling softness that only truth carries. I swallowed, unsure whether to admit what I already felt. But the fitting assistant called us over before I could respond. 2 days later came the moment everything clicked into place. I walked into Marissa's living room to drop off the finalized timeline for the rehearsal dinner. Serena was on the couch with her phone raised and her thumb hovering over the group chat. Oh, she said when she noticed me, didn't know you were coming by. Her tone wasn't hostile, it was worse, it was dismissive. Marissa glanced at me and said, we're confirming the guest seating. Serena found a better layout than the one you sent. Better, not kinder, not fairer, just better because it came from Serena. Then Serena's screen lit up with my mother's message. The one that had uninvited me, and right there in front of me, her thumb tapped the little heart next to it. A single, like, it didn't make a sound, but something inside me did a soft, painful crack like thin ice giving way. Serena didn't even look up. She just locked her phone and said it's for the best, Val. Everyone agrees. I remember staring at the two of them. The air suddenly too heavy to breathe. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind saying they're preparing things without you. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was intentional. Coordinated and carried out with the same casual cruelty someone uses when swatting away an inconvenience. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't dealing with a mistake. I was dealing with a plan. The night after Serena liked the message that erased me, I sat alone in my apartment with the wedding payments pulled up on my laptop. Line after line glowed back at me, showing venue deposits, lighting adjustments, catering schedules, and floral installments, all approved and all paid by me. It looked less like a celebration and more like a ledger documenting my own erasure. For years, I told myself my family didn't mean to take advantage of me, that I was helping, that my support made things easier. But staring at those payments, I finally saw the truth. They weren't relying on me, they were consuming me. My phone buzzed once with a new message in the family thread. Serena again sent the updated seating chart saying Mom wants my layout instead. No please, no thank you, just a demand. It was surreal how quickly cruelty can become mundane. So I closed the laptop before I could second guess what came next. My hands didn't shake and my breath didn't hitch. It felt like something inside me had gone still and sharp. I opened a private message to my mother and typed 2 words, great choice. For a moment, my reflection stared back at me from the dark window. I looked calm, composed, and finally like a woman who had stepped out of a role she never chose. Then I added the second sentence, the one they weren't expecting. Then you'll be free of my payments too. No explanation, no anger, just facts, and I hit send. The silence that followed felt almost holy. I opened my laptop again, this time with purpose. One by one, like pulling threads from a tapestry, I reviewed every contract attached to the event. Catering, lighting team, venue coordination, decor rentals. Every single agreement was tied to my personal account and every approval was under my name. The authority they had assumed was theirs had always been mine. I didn't need to argue with them, I just needed to stop enabling them. I emailed each vendor individually referencing agreement sections and timelines saying we will not be moving forward. Please cancel the pending invoice and do not process additional payments. I didn't disclose family issues because this wasn't revenge gossip. It was boundary setting, clean and professional. I want to pause here for a second and ask you guys something. Was I being too harsh by canceling everything without a warning? Or did they deserve it for treating me like an ATM? Tell me in the comments because honestly I struggled with it. That night as I worked, a strange peace filled the room. Not satisfaction, not vengeance, just alignment. Like I was finally acting in a way that matched the truth of what I felt. Around midnight I heard a soft knock on my door. It was my grandmother. Her small frame seemed even smaller in the hallway light. She stepped inside and sat on my couch, smoothing her skirt the way she always did when she was gathering courage. I know they hurt you, she said quietly, but you don't have to carry them anymore. Her voice trembled, and that more than anything broke something open in me. My family had treated her the same way, an afterthought, a resource to be used. She knew what it meant to love people who didn't protect you, so I took her hand and said, I'm done carrying them, Grandma. I'm choosing us this time. She nodded with eyes shining not with sadness, but with something like pride. And before she left, she whispered, when they come home, we'll be ready. And for the first time in my life, I believed her. The morning they were scheduled to return felt strangely quiet, like the city itself was holding its breath. My grandmother sat at the kitchen table folding and unfolding the same napkin while her eyes drifted toward the window. Every few seconds, I brewed tea just to keep my hands occupied, the steam warming my face as reality settled deeper into my chest because this was the day everything shifted. I checked my phone one last time and saw no messages from my family, not even a courtesy update about their flight, which wasn't surprising since as far as they were concerned, I didn't exist unless they needed a solution. But today they were going to need something else entirely. Are you sure you're ready? My grandmother asked softly, and I nodded more than ready. We arrived at the airport earlier than necessary, my grandmother holding my arm as we walked through the terminal. She didn't say much, but her presence was the anchor I'd needed my whole life, steady, warm, and honest. Every step felt like reclaiming ground I didn't know I'd lost. Our attorney Mason met us near the arrivals hall. He was calm, collected, and the kind of person who made chaos feel manageable. He nodded to us before flipping open a folder, saying everything's in order, we'll wait. Until they exit baggage claim, they'll likely approach you first, so be prepared for that. Prepared for their version of the story, I murmured, and he offered a faint smile, saying people who depend on you rarely prepare to face a world where you've stopped giving. My grandmother squeezed my hand as a ripple of movement pulled our attention. To the sliding doors, passengers began spilling out with tired steps and crinkled clothing. Then I saw them, Marissa leading the way back straight with an expression sharp, as if she'd returned from a triumphant holiday. Serena followed closely, dragging an overstuffed suitcase, while Damon walked behind her, face buried in his phone. For a fleeting second, instinct tugged at me, the old urge to greet them, to smooth things over, to stay small enough to keep the peace. But that version of me belonged to a life I no longer lived. My mother spotted us first. Confusion flickered across her face, quickly replaced by irritation. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, pulling her coat tighter around her shoulders. "You didn't need to pick us up. We already have a ride." "We're not here to pick you up," I said. Serena rolled her eyes and asked, "Then what, you're here to apologize for ruining our wedding plans?" My grandmother inhaled sharply, but Mason stepped forward before I could speak. "Good morning, my name is Mason Hill. I represent Valentina and her grandmother in a matter requiring your immediate attention." The color drained from my mother's face while Serena blinked rapidly, her chest rising in shallow breaths. "This must be a joke," Marissa said, forcing a laugh. "A lawyer for what?" "For the financial exploitation concerning wedding-related funds," Mason replied evenly, handing her an envelope, "and the attempt to use your mother's savings without consent." My mother snatched the document but didn't open it, saying we didn't exploit anyone. Everything was agreed upon because Valentina offered to help. She always does. "That's the problem," I said quietly. "You expected it, not because I wanted to, but because you refused to see me as anything other than a source of solutions." Serena stepped toward me, jabbing a finger in my direction, yelling, "You abandoned your responsibilities. You ruined everything. All you had to do was stay out of the way." "Stay out of the way," my grandmother echoed, her voice trembling but strong. "You told her not to come. You told my granddaughter she wasn't welcome at a wedding she paid for." Serena faltered, her glare weakening as my mother spun toward my grandmother, saying, "Mother, stop being dramatic. This is a family matter." "No," Grandma said firmly, lifting her chin. "Family doesn't discard one person to elevate another." A crowd had begun forming behind us, travelers slowing to watch, murmuring as tension thickened the air. My mother hated scenes, so her cheeks reddened as she glanced around, as if public humiliation were somehow my fault too. "We didn't do anything wrong," Marissa insisted. "You're twisting this." But Mason opened another folder, saying, "These are copies of the messages sent to Valentina, including the one uninviting her to the event." And this, he held up another page, is documentation of the payments she made. I watched my mother's eyes flick from page to page, her jaw tightening. Then Mason handed Serena a separate envelope, asking, "What's this supposed to be?" "Notice regarding the attempted redirection of your grandmother's emergency fund," Mason replied, tone cool. "An account Valentina has been monitoring, as she is the only family member who has never withdrawn from it." Serena clutched the envelope like it might burn her. Marissa turned back to me, voice thin and sharp, asking, "How dare you bring strangers into our private affairs?" "You made it private when you pushed me out," I said, "and made it legal when you tried to use Grandma's savings because you ran out of mine." Damon, who had remained oddly quiet, finally spoke, saying, "Look, can we all calm down? This is getting blown out of proportion." "Blown out of proportion," my grandmother repeated. "You encouraged Serena to ask for more money, more support, things she never earned." Damon's jaw tightened, saying, "That's not true." But Serena snapped at him, saying, "Stop, just stop talking." Something inside her seemed to deflate. Her shoulders sagged, her bravado leaking away in slow, painful beats. She looked less like the glittering bride she'd envisioned herself as, and more like a child caught doing something selfish. My mother's hand shook as she shoved the documents back at Mason, saying, "We can fix this. Just tell us what you want, Valentina." I took a breath, steady and sure. "I want you to understand that I'm done being your safety net. Done paying for consequences you never learn from. And done pretending we're a family when you treat me like a mistake." Silence stretched between. Heavy and suffocating, then Serena whispered, "So you're punishing us?" I shook my head. "No, I'm protecting myself." Mason stepped in again, saying, "There are steps you'll need to follow. You'll have to respond to these notices within the given time frame, and until this matter is resolved, you're not permitted to access the grandmother's accounts." Marissa finally opened the envelope, and her eyes scanned the first line. Her expression crumbled, fear replacing indignation, as she whispered, "This could get us in trouble." "It already did," my grandmother replied. My mother looked between us, her confidence dissolving, saying, "Valentina, please, we're family." I met her gaze with a clarity I had earned the hard way. Family is supposed to protect each other, not just themselves. And for the first time in my life, she didn't have a response. Edward, who had stayed silent until now, finally stepped forward, saying, "I'm sorry, Val, we should have done better." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from him. I nodded, accepting the words without letting them excuse anything. Mason gathered his folders, saying, "We're done here." My grandmother took my arm again, her grip steady. As we turned to leave, my mother called after me, asking, "Valentina, what are we supposed to do now?" I paused long enough to meet her eyes and said, "Figure it out, the same way you expected me to." And with that, I walked away, not out of anger, but out Of freedom. The first real freedom I'd felt in years. In the weeks that followed, everything settled the way truth always does. Quietly but permanently. The notices Mason filed moved forward, and for the first time, there were real boundaries around my grandmother's savings. No more borrowing, no more pressure disguised as family tradition. The account was protected, and so was she. I visited her more often after that. We'd sit in her small garden while she trimmed roses the same way she had when I was a child. But this time she didn't look tired. She looked lighter, as if she'd been holding her breath for years without realizing it. The wedding plans dissolved almost overnight. Vendors sent confirmations of canceled payments. Messages trickled into my phone, some angry, some embarrassed, some painfully silent. But I didn't respond to any of them, not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say. One afternoon, my grandmother rested a hand over mine, saying, "You saved both of us." But I didn't feel like a savior. I felt like someone finally stepping into her own life. Looking back, I used to think love meant carrying everything for the people who claimed they needed me. But real love never asks you to disappear so others can shine. My family's choices didn't define me, my boundaries did. And walking away wasn't the end of something broken, it was the beginning of something honest. If this story satisfied your need for justice, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss the next dose of karma.